welcome back to Sticky Floor Friday, the internet movie show that will now recap the Oscars for the many, many people who did not see it. Welcome to the 93rd Academy Awards, where every presenter will speak in the same self-serious, monotone drone. Because cinema is important. It's not supposed to be entertaining. Do you like spectacle? We don't. Do you like music? We don't care. Do you like jokes? We have exactly one of those. It's at the 3.5 hour mark, and it's an insta-meme of Glenn Close saying, "Da butt." It's the best and worst part of the show. Do you like clips of the movies we're celebrating? F*** you. Do you like speeches kept tight with the looming thread of music playing off long-winded speakers? Well, we have a treat for you. We're letting the winners talk as long as they have breath in their bodies and forcing them to say the name of every single person they've ever met. And to close the show, because we have a really, really good feeling we know who's going to win, and it'll make for a very emotional final tribute, we will close with Best Actor. And the winner is Anthony Hopkins. Good night! Now, since I've returned, I've gotten a lot of really nice comments from people who used to watch me back in the day. They're all saying kind of the same thing, that seeing me return has them feeling nostalgic, which I appreciate, but I just want to assure everybody, moving forward, I am all about looking ahead, forging new territory, and talking about the latest, greatest movies coming out. And that's my promise to you. We're always going to try and keep it current. So let's talk about the movie coming out this week. It is Scott Pilgrim versus the World 10th Anniversary re-release. Okay, we all saw it in the title. We knew this was coming. And here we are, more nostalgia. I'm sure next week there'll be a new movie coming out. Maybe. Hopefully. But for now, let's talk Scott Pilgrim. I actually did talk about it back in the day. Here's what I said.
I hope Scott Pilgrim doesn't turn into one of those things where people try and jam it down your throat. Like when I say to somebody, "Oh, I haven't seen The Wire yet." And they're like, "What?"
So here we are, 11 years later for the 10th anniversary of Scott Pilgrim. You do the math. I guess they were just saying 2020 never existed, but it definitely did. I was there for like 4 years. But it's been 11 years since the release of Scott Pilgrim, the hit that wasn't, that became the cult classic that never really came to be. At the time, Scott Pilgrim was being positioned as like a really big summer hit. You know Universal had faith in it because they let them mess with the studio logo. And you know they're not handing that out to anybody. Matrix maybe, little Tron, Lego movie. There was intense buzz coming out of Comic-Con for this. It was going to be a game changer. And then on August 13th, 2010, Scott Pilgrim opens opposite The Expendables and Eat, Pray, Love. Easy competition. Take out Stallone and his geezer gang, and don't even worry about Eat, Pray, Love. The title tells you everything that will happen in the movie. No problem. Nope. Problem. Expendables opened at number 1. Eat, Pray, Love opened at number 2. Scott Pilgrim opened at number 5. $10 million. The next week, 10th place. And that was it. It was over. 31 million total, which is like, oh, okay, well, that's not a bad tally until you consider that movie cost $85 million. 85 for a comedy? So why did Scott Pilgrim fail? Usually the first thing that people blame is the marketing campaign. Let's take a look at the posters. They kind of had trouble conveying what the movie was about. The teaser trailer tried to balance the romance and the action, but I think it was pretty confusing to general audiences. How do you describe this movie to people anyway? It's like, hey kids and adults, do you want to see a movie based on a graphic novel, but it looks like a video game, and it's about a 22-year-old selfish, neurotic, unmotivated asshole who dates a high schooler, but then he finds a manic pixie dream girl, and in order to date her, he must defeat her 7 exes, even though she maybe isn't really even all that into him all that much? I don't know, maybe that was part of it. Another reason this failed, it requires you to enter the theater preloaded with knowledge of video games. There's a reference early on where Scott says he learned the bass part to Final Fantasy II, and that is a reference for like, I don't know, 2,000 people, right? So the language of this movie is video games. The music, the fights, the altered studio logo, and yet it's based on a graphic novel? So is it a video game movie or a comic book movie? Maybe at the time it was a comic book movie, but actually since then they created a Scott Pilgrim video game, so maybe now it's considered a video game movie? That's some Inception shit right there. And that's a reference you get because Inception also came out in 2010, but that made $292 million. Speaking of the comic book, Scott Pilgrim was an indie phenomenon. But before the movie came out, the 6th volume sold out 100,000 first print run, which is huge for an indie comic, but it doesn't exactly translate to box office awareness. Although after the movie came out, the comics got a bump, leading to 1 million Scott Pilgrim overall book sales. So the comics didn't help the movie sales, but the movie helped the back issue comic sales. Is that some Inception shit right there? I don't know. Let's also remember, back in 2010, just because you had a comic book movie property didn't guarantee success, as seen here. And finally, we have to talk about the cast. Scott Pilgrim has a ton of young, up-and-coming stars, but they weren't quite big enough individually, collectively, or Captain America-ly at the time to move the box office needle. Which brings us to the star, Michael Cera. You know, he had a nice little box office run starting with Superbad, but in the lead up to Scott Pilgrim, the Michael Cera era was coming to an end. He had 3 movies in 2009, one of which is a career low for a trifecta of incredibly talented people. It was Harold Ramis's last movie, which is a shame because Harold Ramis is sweet. Although I'm sure in this current landscape of content-starved internet with infinite takes on every piece of media in existence, somebody's out there cracking their knuckles over a keyboard and prepping a "actually year one is a secret masterpiece" article. Now apparently Universal also thought that Michael Cera was going to bring in a bigger female audience, but only 36% of ticket buyers were women. And while Scott Pilgrim was the beginning of many, many big careers, it was Cera's last time headlining a movie. It's kind of sad, huh? Scott Pilgrim always had a strong fan base, but I think it's in this weird middle ground where it wasn't big enough to be a hit in theaters, and it wasn't obscure enough to be considered a cult classic. For that to happen, it needed a smaller budget, a quieter release, and also to have bad reviews. Like, the reviews were really good. What do I think of Scott Pilgrim today? Well, first let's talk Edgar Wright. He's had a pretty spotless career, in my opinion. I loved Space. I'm a massive, massive Shaun of the Dead fan. I like Hot Fuzz. I like the first half of The World's End, although I think that one suffers from crossing genres. It worked for Shaun, it worked for Fuzz, but World's End had a strong enough premise. It didn't need the sci-fi twist. And then Baby Driver is the logical extension of Scott Pilgrim and basically fulfilled everything they thought Scott Pilgrim would be. And it cost $40 million less. Very nice. Not so nice. Yeah, some of the cast is pretty problematic. Also, I once saw Edgar Wright hanging at a bar with Quentin Tarantino at Hollywood and Highland, and Tarantino was getting approached by a bunch of people, and nobody even noticed Edgar Wright. I did, and we kind of shared this look like, yeah, I mean, this is what happens when you go out in public to a bar with Tarantino. Just sit here all by yourself. Anyway, Edgar Wright was poised to finally have a huge hit with Scott Pilgrim, and it seemed like a good fit. Frenetic energy, characters loaded with millennial malaise being thrust into extremely challenging situations. And for the most part, I think he delivers. Scott Pilgrim has a joke ratio of like 4 per minute, maybe more, and it never lets up. It's incredibly funny. There's still moments that catch me off guard and make me laugh out loud.
Bread makes you fat.
Bread makes you fat?
It's clearly made with love and passion and attention to detail. However, I understand this is not for everyone. Even for me, which this movie seems specifically aimed. It can be exhausting. If it's possible to be bored by overstimulation, it happens for me around the point where Scott has to battle the twins. I also credit the exhaustion to Scott Pilgrim himself. I've been a fan of Michael Cera since the beginning. He is genius on Arrested Development, and a lot of Scott Pilgrim works because of the audience's familiarity with his past performances. But Scott the character is really hard to like. He's selfish, single-minded, and lazy. And maybe that's the point because people keep pointing out that he's an asshole and he should learn and grow. And I don't need my characters all to be likable, but at times Scott can be insufferably whiny and a borderline stalker. Plus he treats Knives Chow like dirt. How dare you? At least she gets to be the one who rejects him in the end, and she has the most honest line in the movie, "I'm too cool for you anyway," but still. The other character to bear part of this issue is Ramona Flowers. As I mentioned earlier, she's a classic manic pixie dream girl, the term invented by writer Nathan Rabin to describe a female character who exists solely in the fevered imaginations of sensitive writer-directors to teach broodingly soulful young men to embrace life and its infinite mysteries and adventures. But here's what's weird. It's incredibly unclear if Ramona even likes Scott. She seems mostly bored with the whole affair, and at times she's outright annoyed to be with him. Is this something you could have solved by having like a real connection between them and you see her actually want Scott to succeed? I don't know, it's like they were afraid of giving her actual emotions because they wanted to make her seem above it all and really cool, but really it just comes across as her being disengaged. And I think that's a weakness. The trick here is you need Scott to be sympathetic and for Scott and Ramona to have so much chemistry that you root for him to defeat the exes and get the girl. The whole movie hinges on that. But the further he gets, the less engaged I am in the outcome. It's like, if he's as much of a jerk as her ex is, who cares? So that's the disconnect I feel. But in the end, maybe they both deserve each other because they're both so aloof and bad at relationships. There's an alternate ending where Scott and Knives get back together, but first of all, Scott doesn't deserve Knives. And second of all, you can't have a movie where half the runtime is Scott fighting exes to date someone and then he ends up with someone else. Then again, I don't know, maybe the movie's just saying when you're young and you're in love, you do stupid things, you make mistakes, and whatever. This is a style over substance movie, clearly, and that's okay. It's so fast-paced and dense with jokes, it just bulldozes past all those issues I have with it, and then it's over. So if you haven't seen Scott Pilgrim, or you love Scott Pilgrim and you want to boost its lifelong box office, you can see it in select theaters, or, just sitting there on Netflix, waiting for you to watch it. Whew! Okay. That's it. No more Scott Pilgrim. No more nostalgia. I am back next week with an all-new movie. It's Wrath of Man, a Guy Ritchie movie starring Jason Statham. Are we sure this isn't a movie I covered 10 years ago? Guy Ritchie and Jason Statham? Are you kidding me? Well, I guess if anybody's going to cover Jason Statham, it's going to be me.
She doesn't know to Canada, my one true love, who happens to be, you guessed it, it's Jason Statham.
He makes things so... He's just so freaking good. God, I love him.
Are you serious, Academy? Are you guys even paying attention anymore? Do you care about movies? You're not gonna recognize Jason Statham's performance in The Expendables? Seriously, how freaking awesome is Statham?